Have you ever felt like your paycheck just disappears on rent? For almost half of American renters, 49.7% to be exact, that's exactly what's happening. The dream of homeownership that our parents took for granted has morphed into something that feels impossible for our generation. In this documentary, we're pulling back the curtain on why housing costs have exploded 57.8% since 2019, while our paychecks have barely budged. Whether you're a frustrated renter, a hopeful first-time buyer, or someone trying to understand the housing crisis, this is the breakdown you've been waiting for. What forces are really driving this housing nightmare, and who's profiting while we struggle? Meet the families, 3 stories of housing heartbreak. This is Zoe and Tyler. Last month, they put in their 7th offer on a starter home, 20% above asking price. They lost to an all-cash investor who never even saw the property. Meet Zoe and Tyler, both 32, who've been saving for a home since they graduated college. They've done everything right. Paid down student loans, built emergency savings, and even sacrificed their daily coffee runs. Now, with a solid down payment saved up, they're trapped in an endless cycle of rejection notices and disappointment. "We thought we were prepared," Zoe explains, her voice cracking slightly as she scrolls through photos of yet another home they'll never own. "We have good jobs, decent credit scores, and we've saved like crazy. But every single time, we're outbid by investors or people paying all cash. Their rental apartment feels increasingly temporary. Bare walls they can't paint, furniture they haven't replaced because, what's the point when we're moving soon? Except soon has stretched into 3 years of searching." The breaking point came during a walkthrough of a modest 2-bedroom home. Standing in what could have been a nursery, Tyler squeezed Zoe's hand. "That's when it hit us," he says. "We're postponing our entire life plan. Having kids, putting down roots in a community. It all feels impossible now." Across town, another family faces a different kind of housing struggle. Maria and Carlos Martinez live with their 2 children, Sofia, 8, and Miguel, 5, in a 2-bedroom apartment in Phoenix. For years ago, their rent was $1,100 a month. Today, it's $1,850, a 68% increase, while their incomes have grown by just 12%. "Every time the lease renewal comes, I feel physically sick," Maria confesses. "We negotiated down from a $300 increase to $200 last year, but we're still drowning. The complex stopped maintaining the playground, the pool is often closed, and they've cut back on all services." The hardest part came when they had to tell Sofia she couldn't have the backyard she's been drawing in her school art projects. "She keeps asking when we can move to a real house like her friends have," Carlos says, staring at the floor. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that housing costs have completely outpaced what mom and dad earn? Maria opens her budget spreadsheet. After rent, healthcare premiums, groceries, and the kids' needs, there's literally nothing left to save for a down payment. It's like running on a treadmill that keeps getting faster. As our camera slowly pans across a quiet suburban neighborhood of aging homes, we meet a couple facing housing challenges from a different generational perspective. Barbara, 69, and William, 72. Johnson should be enjoying their golden years in their paid-off suburban 4-bedroom home. Instead, they're trapped in a house that no longer serves their needs, but that they can't afford to leave. "We bought this place in 1992 for $185,000, Barbara explains from her living room, where a stairlift was recently installed. "Now it's worth about $720,000, which sounds great until you realize we can't afford anything else even if we sell." William, who recently had hip replacement surgery, motions to the stairs. "Our bedroom is up there, but some days I sleep on the couch because climbing hurts too much. We've looked at single-story homes and condos, but they're either too expensive or would leave us without enough retirement savings." The Johnsons have watched their property taxes and insurance costs soar while living on fixed incomes. "Our children live across the country," Barbara says. "We'd love to downsize and use some equity to be closer to our grandkids, but the numbers just don't work. We're essentially trapped by our own home's value." William opens a spreadsheet showing their retirement calculations. "If we sell and buy something comparable but single level, we'd have to withdraw an extra $1,200 monthly from our retirement accounts. That means we'd run out of money by our mid-80s. These aren't isolated stories. A time-lapse visualization shows how dramatically housing costs have outpaced income growth for each family. Zoe and Tyler have seen home prices in their target neighborhood increase 41% in just 3 years, while their incomes rose only 8%. The Martinez family's rent-to-income ratio has gone from a manageable 25% to an overwhelming 42%. And the Johnsons have watched property taxes increase at 3 times the rate of their fixed retirement income. The psychological impacts ripple through every aspect of their lives. Research shows that housing insecurity correlates strongly with increased anxiety, depression, and relationship strain. One study found that couples experiencing repeated failed home purchase attempts reported relationship satisfaction levels comparable to those going through major life crises. For the Martinez children, the consequences may be even more lasting. Studies show that children who move frequently due to housing instability score lower on academic performance metrics and report higher levels of social isolation. Sophia's teacher has already noted changes in her classroom participation since the family began discussing potential moves to find more affordable housing. The housing crisis reshapes life trajectories. Zoe and Tyler have indefinitely postponed having children. The Martinez family has cut extracurricular activities that might have developed their children's talents. And the Johnsons face potential health complications from living in a home that no longer meets their physical needs. As we continue following these families throughout our documentary, we'll see how they navigate these challenges, the compromises, the creative solutions, and sometimes the heartbreaking sacrifices they're forced to make. The numbers don't lie. America's housing affordability collapse. In 1980, it took about 5 years for the average American to save for a down payment. Today, try 14 years if you don't eat or pay for anything else. When nearly half of Americans are struggling to afford housing, we're facing a mathematical disaster that's been brewing for decades. The housing crisis reflects cold, hard numbers that reveal just how broken our housing system has become. And trust me, these numbers are about to make you seriously question whether the American dream still exists for anyone without a trust fund. Let's get real about what affordability actually means. Financial experts consider spending more than 30% of your income on housing to be cost-burdened. And in 2023, a shocking 31.3% of American households crossed that threshold. That's nearly 1/3 of the entire country struggling with housing costs. For renters, the situation is even more grim, with 49.7% spending more than 30% of their income on housing. Think about what that means in real money terms. The median monthly cost of owning a home hit an estimated $3,000 in 2023. $3,000 every single month. That's like making a car payment on a brand new Tesla, except you're just trying to avoid homelessness. What's truly shocking is how dramatically the price-to-income ratio has shifted. Today, homes cost 5.6 times the median household income, the highest in recorded history. It's like trying to climb a mountain that doubled in height since your parents made the journey. The game has completely changed, and not in our favor. Millennials need nearly double the relative income their parents needed to afford a similar home. Imagine if suddenly groceries cost twice as much as they did for your parents, relative to income. We'd call that a national emergency. But somehow with housing, we're expected to just figure it out. Even more troubling is how the Housing Affordability Index for first-time buyers plummeted to 65.8 in 2024. This means the average first-time buyer doesn't have enough income to qualify for a mortgage on a median-priced home. When the index falls below 100, affordability is officially in crisis territory. At 65.8, we're deep in nightmare territory. This crisis has spread across the country like an economic cancer. Heat maps tracking cost-burdened households show that the crisis has metastasized from traditional coastal cities to previously affordable regions. Places that were once refuges for those seeking reasonable housing costs are experiencing their own affordability emergencies. Take California, where 40.6% of households spend more than 30% of their income on housing. That's 2 out of every 5 households struggling to make housing payments. But this pattern is repeating across the country in places that used to be affordable alternatives. Remember when people would say, just move somewhere cheaper? Well, those cheaper places are disappearing fast. The affordability crisis is now a national epidemic, not a coastal elite problem. When housing eats up such a massive portion of your income, everything else gets squeezed. That dream vacation? Postponed indefinitely. Saving for retirement? Good luck with that. Starting a family? Maybe in another decade. The ripple effects touch every aspect of American life, from family planning to career choices to mental health. The timing couldn't be worse. These affordability metrics are cratering just as millennials, the largest generation, are hitting their prime home buying years. Unlike previous generations who could reasonably expect to buy a home in their late 20s or early 30s, today's young adults are facing a market that seems designed to keep them renting forever. Multiple factors have created this perfect storm. Rising construction costs, zoning restrictions, investor activity, stagnant wages, and insufficient housing supply have all combined to create the most challenging housing market in generations. The data reveals a system fundamentally out of balance. Housing prices have skyrocketed while wages have barely budged. The median home price has climbed at twice the rate of median income over the past decade. It's like someone pressed the accelerator on housing costs while simultaneously putting the brake on wages. This crisis exposes a troubling wealth gap in America. For existing homeowners, rapid appreciation has been a windfall, building equity and wealth. But for those still trying to get their foot in the door, it's created a nearly insurmountable barrier. Each passing year widens the gap between owners and non-owners. Geographic spread of the crisis has created a new kind of economic segregation. Entire cities are becoming inaccessible to middle and working-class families. Communities that once housed people of diverse economic backgrounds are transforming into enclaves for the wealthy, while those with less income are pushed farther from job centers, amenities, and opportunities. What happens to a society when an entire generation can't afford to buy homes? We're conducting a massive economic experiment in real time, and the early results don't look good. Family formation is delayed, birth rates decline, wealth inequality grows, and social mobility stalls. For many millennials, the traditional timeline of adulthood has been completely derailed by housing costs. The milestones their parents took for granted have become luxury goods accessible only to the privileged few or those lucky enough to receive family help. The housing affordability crisis is about the American dream itself. When home ownership becomes unattainable for a large segment of the population, we have to question whether our economy is working as it should. Housing has transformed from a basic need into a speculative asset class, with devastating consequences for ordinary Americans. The missing millions, America's housing supply crisis. Behind this fundamental restructuring lurks a shocking math problem that nobody's talking about. America is missing 3.8 million homes. That's not a typo. Imagine if every single person in Connecticut suddenly had nowhere to live. That's the scale of our national housing shortage. This massive deficit emerged gradually after the 2008 housing crash. While most people remember the foreclosures and financial chaos, another devastating legacy persists today. When the market collapsed, construction rates plummeted like a rock thrown off a cliff, dropping by more than 50%. That's like trying to feed a growing family with half your previous grocery budget. Meanwhile, our population kept growing, people formed new households, and young adults wanted independence. But the homes they needed weren't being built. When demand grows but supply gets cut in half, prices skyrocket. This represents a fundamental supply-demand imbalance that's been intensifying for over a decade. The problem goes deeper than just total numbers. It's about the types of homes being built. Experts call it the missing middle housing crisis, and it's like a puzzle with crucial pieces removed from the board. Take Oakwood Heights, a neighborhood I visited in Michigan. In the 1950s, it featured a mix of small apartment buildings, duplexes, and single-family homes on the same blocks. Young couples could rent apartments, then move to townhomes as they started families, and eventually buy single-family homes, all within the same community. Today, those apartment buildings and duplexes have been demolished. The neighborhood's housing ladder is missing its lower rungs, forcing residents to either overextend for single-family homes or move away entirely. This pattern repeats across America. Look around most cities, and you'll see either detached single-family homes growing more expensive by the minute, or massive apartment complexes. The middle ground, housing that historically provided affordable stepping stones for first-time buyers or downsizing seniors, has largely vanished. Much of this comes down to zoning laws that favor single-family homes. Approximately 70% of residential areas in major cities restrict or ban apartments. These regulations, many dating back decades, have become like handcuffs on housing development. They've made it illegal to build the very housing that could help solve our affordability crisis. In most American neighborhoods, it's against the law to build anything except the most expensive type of housing. Imagine regulations requiring only luxury SUVs be manufactured while banning affordable compact cars. That's essentially what we've done with housing. The construction labor shortage creates another barrier in our housing puzzle. The industry faces an aging workforce with retiring skilled tradespeople, plus immigration restrictions limiting new workers. Without enough electricians, plumbers, and framers, builders can't construct homes regardless of price incentives, like trying to build a house with half the necessary tools. I recently spoke with Eduardo, a builder in Arizona who's been in business for 25 years. He told me, "I've got permits for 200 homes, but I can only build about 70 this year because I can't find enough skilled workers. I'm turning away business every day, even though prices are the highest I've ever seen." Eduardo's situation reflects a nationwide reality. Builders everywhere struggle with labor shortages, rising material costs, regulatory burdens, and restrictive zoning that limits where and what they can build. You might wonder, if demand is high and prices are soaring, why aren't builders constructing more homes? It seems like the perfect business opportunity. The answer involves several key factors. The construction business climate has become incredibly challenging. Builders face regulatory hurdles, unpredictable material costs, and labor shortages that complicate project planning. Many smaller builders never recovered from the 2008 crash, leaving fewer companies with capacity for new projects. Additionally, zoning restrictions limit building potential regardless of demand. You can have willing builders, but when local regulations mandate certain homes per acre or require large minimum lot sizes, creating affordable housing becomes mathematically impossible, like trying to solve an equation with missing variables. Economic uncertainty has also made builders cautious. With fluctuating interest rates and recession concerns, many hesitate to take significant risks needed to dramatically increase production. Some industry leaders remain hopeful about regulatory improvements. As one executive put it, "We know how to build homes. We have the technology and expertise. What we need is a regulatory framework that allows us to build the kinds of homes people can actually afford in the places they want to live." The crisis varies regionally. While the national shortage totals about 3.8 million homes, some metropolitan areas face deficits of hundreds of thousands of units. California represents a significant portion of this shortage, with Los Angeles and San Francisco experiencing particularly severe deficits. The problem has spread beyond coastal regions. Cities like Austin, Denver, Nashville, and Boise, once affordable alternatives, have seen housing shortages intensify as relocations drive up prices in these destination markets. The painful irony: people move to escape high housing costs, but create new shortages in their destination cities. It's like everyone rushing to a new exit on a jammed highway, only to create another traffic jam at that exit. Wall Street's land grab: how investors changed the housing game. As those traffic jams of frustrated homebuyers get worse at their new affordable destinations, they're facing an unexpected opponent at the open houses. In Springfield, Missouri, nearly 1 in 5 homes sold in early 2024 went straight to investors who had zero intention of ever living in them. These patterns repeated across Kansas City and St. Louis, with investor purchases hitting 20.1% and 18.9% respectively. When families talk about being outbid on their dream homes, this is what they're up against. What's happening in today's housing market isn't just personal disappointment. It's a fundamental shift in who owns American homes and how they're bought and sold. The dream of homeownership has transformed from a community milestone into something resembling a high-stakes Wall Street trading floor, complete with algorithmic pricing and institutional capital competing against family savings accounts. Investors have grown from a small slice of the market into major players, reshaping entire neighborhoods, explaining why finding affordable housing feels impossible for so many Americans. The numbers tell a shocking story. Across the country, investors purchased 14.8% of all homes sold in early 2024, literally the highest percentage ever recorded. Nearly 1 in every 7 homes sold isn't going to a family planning birthday parties in the backyard or planting a garden. It's going into an investment portfolio. What's particularly interesting about this investor surge is who these investors actually are. When most people hear investors buying homes, they picture huge Wall Street firms or anonymous corporations, but the reality is more nuanced. Small investors, those owning 10 or fewer properties, actually make up 62.6% of all investor purchases in 2024. These are often local landlords who might own a handful of rental properties as their business or retirement strategy. Institutional investors remain significant players with evolving tactics since the 2008 housing crash. Companies like Blackstone's Invitation Homes initially bought foreclosed properties at rock-bottom prices. Today, their strategies target affordable starter homes in growing markets, exactly the properties first-time buyers desperately seek. The tech side of this investor shift is particularly concerning. Landlords increasingly use algorithmic pricing tools like RealPage to coordinate rent increases across markets. These sophisticated programs analyze competitors' pricing and recommend optimal rent levels, leading to situations where rents rise in lockstep across entire cities. The concentration of pricing power has raised serious concerns about potential antitrust violations. When algorithms essentially help landlords coordinate pricing, are we still operating in a truly competitive market? This matters because research from the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis shows these investor purchases directly impact affordability. When institutional investors buy up properties, they drive up the price-to-income ratio in those areas, making homeownership even more out of reach. And they're specifically focused on entry-level homes that are critical for first-time buyers. The geographic concentration makes this even more problematic. In states like Georgia, Nevada, and Arizona, investors accounted for over 30% of sales in some areas during 2021. When investor ownership becomes concentrated in specific neighborhoods, it fundamentally changes those communities. Rents rise faster, and homes available for owner occupancy become scarce. Mom-and-pop investors operate differently than the big institutional players. These small landlords, who typically own between 3 and 10 properties, are often local residents themselves who understand the communities they're investing in. While they're still profit-motivated, they tend to have more personalized management approaches compared to large corporations managing thousands of units through standardized systems. The institutional side of the market is where things get particularly concerning. Giant investment funds with billions to deploy scan markets for opportunities. These are pension funds, private equity firms, and other financial players looking for stable returns. When mortgage rates jumped and home sales slowed, investor activity dipped slightly in 2024, but remains well above pre-pandemic levels. In today's bidding wars, cash is king. Institutional buyers often make all-cash offers that are incredibly attractive to sellers. No financing contingencies, fast closings, and sometimes even waived inspections. For a family scraping together a down payment and needing mortgage approval, competing against these cash offers feels like bringing a squirt gun to a wildfire. The impact goes beyond just the purchase price. When investors control a significant percentage of homes in a neighborhood, they can essentially set the market rate for both sales and rentals. Small changes in their pricing algorithms can ripple through entire communities, affecting affordability for everyone. Families looking to buy their first home are competing against sophisticated investment strategies backed by massive capital. This investor activity creates a troubling feedback loop. As more homes become investor-owned rentals, fewer homes are available for purchase. This scarcity drives up prices, making homeownership less attainable, which forces more families to rent, which makes rental properties more profitable for investors, encouraging them to buy even more homes. It's a cycle that's increasingly difficult to break. The human cost of this transition is real. When neighborhoods shift toward investor ownership, the character of communities changes. Long-term residents who know their neighbors get replaced by transient renters with less investment in the community. The pride of ownership that drives home improvements and neighborhood engagement diminishes. Schools see higher turnover as renting families move more frequently. Unlike some housing market challenges that seem impossible to address, the investor issue actually has potential policy solutions. Some communities have experimented with limits on corporate ownership of single-family homes or requirements that investors hold properties for minimum periods before reselling. Others have tried targeted tax policies that make long-term ownership more attractive than quick flips. But the most effective approach might be addressing the fundamental supply shortage that makes investor purchases so profitable in the first place. When housing is scarce, investors can charge premium rents and count on zoning out affordability, how rules block new housing. That supply shortage isn't just happening by accident. It's literally written into law across America. Ever wonder why you don't see apartment buildings or even duplexes popping up in certain neighborhoods, no matter how desperate people are for housing? Those invisible lines drawn on city maps might be the biggest housing affordability villains you've never heard of. Behind those perfectly manicured lawns and matching single-family homes lies a regulatory system designed to keep housing scarce and expensive. Zoning laws in America have evolved dramatically since their inception. What began as reasonable separation of factories from homes in the early 20th century transformed after the Supreme Court's 1926 Euclid decision, which empowered cities to control development. This legal foundation eventually enabled cities to create highly specific rules about what housing types could exist, where, overwhelmingly favoring single-family homes on large lots, the most expensive and land-consuming option around. The uncomfortable truth. Many early zoning regulations had explicitly racist intentions, designed to maintain segregation without saying so directly. Research shows areas that adopted zoning before 1930 developed significantly higher rates of segregation by 1970 compared to places that implemented zoning later. While the racist language disappeared, the economic barriers these laws create accomplish similar exclusionary outcomes. Today's zoning laws maintain affordability barriers through economic exclusion. By mandating large lot sizes, prohibiting apartments, and allowing only expensive housing types, these regulations effectively post economic residence-only signs in many neighborhoods. Think of it like playing Monopoly, where you can only build on 25% of the board spaces, and the remaining 75% can only have one specific building type. That's how most American cities operate. In 3/4 of residential land across major cities, building townhomes, duplexes, or small apartment buildings. Exactly the missing middle, housing that would be naturally more affordable, is literally against the law. The specific rules cities have created are even more problematic. Excessive parking requirements force developers to build expensive parking spaces, even in transit-rich areas. Inflated minimum lot sizes prevent smaller, more affordable homes. Height restrictions block additional units in high-demand locations. And the approval process can stretch for years, filled with community meetings, environmental reviews, and costly delays. These restrictions translate to real dollars. When developers spend years navigating approvals before construction, those costs pass to future buyers or renters. When forced to build unnecessary parking in walkable neighborhoods, that's space that could have been additional housing. These policies directly increase housing costs for everyone. Fortunately, some places are making real progress with impressive results. Minneapolis boldly eliminated single-family zoning citywide, allowing duplexes and triplexes anywhere housing is permitted. The impact was immediate. Permits for 2 to 4 unit buildings jumped 45% between 2020 and 2022. Oregon followed with statewide legislation allowing duplexes in previously single-family areas. Even California, home to some of America's priciest housing markets, passed laws like SB 9 empowering homeowners to split lots and build additional units. These reforms are already delivering tangible results. Reform cities are seeing diverse housing types emerge, from charming accessory dwelling units to small apartment buildings that blend perfectly with existing neighborhoods. International examples show different approaches work. Countries like Germany and the Netherlands maintain more affordable housing markets, partly through more flexible zoning systems. Their regulations focus on separating incompatible activities rather than micromanaging housing types, resulting in diverse housing options at various price points and better overall affordability. The Zoning Restrictiveness Index from ESI and the Penn Institute of Urban Research demonstrates this connection clearly. This tool evaluates how restrictive different cities' zoning codes are nationwide. Higher values indicate more housing units allowed, while lower values show more restrictive practices. When mapped, America's most expensive housing markets consistently have the most restrictive zoning policies. Imagine a neighborhood where young families can purchase starter homes, singles can rent apartments above coffee shops, and empty nesters can downsize to townhouses, all on the same street. This isn't fantasy. It's how neighborhoods functioned before mid-20th century zoning restrictions took hold. What makes zoning reform appealing is its simplicity. It removes artificial barriers and allows the market to build needed housing without requiring massive government spending or complex subsidy programs. This doesn't mean every neighborhood transforms into high-rise developments, but rather allows greater housing variety to meet diverse community needs. Can zoning reform alone solve our housing crisis? The reality is more nuanced. Even with improved zoning, challenges with construction costs, labor shortages, and financing complicate truly affordable housing development. In some regions, decades of restrictions have created such severe shortages that catching up would require years of aggressive building, even with reformed regulations. The construction cost conundrum. Why builders can't build cheap. Beyond zoning reform lies the cold, hard reality of construction costs that's crushing affordable housing dreams. When a single-family home costs $428,215 just to build, without adding land costs or profit, you've got to wonder if building affordable housing has become mathematically impossible in America. Let me break this down in a way that'll make your wallet weep. That $428,215 figure translates to about $162 per square foot, the highest ever recorded in construction surveys. Think about that. Builders are spending record amounts before hammering a single nail. And while everyone's focused on zoning battles and interest rates, this construction cost explosion has been quietly sabotaging affordability behind the scenes. Looking at the construction cost recipe, it's like a really expensive cake where the ingredients keep getting pricier. The premium ingredients are interior finishes, 24.1%. That's your countertops and cabinets. The essential base includes major systems like electrical and plumbing, 19.2%, and framing, 16.6%. The outer layer combines exterior finishes, 13.4%, foundations, 10.5%, site work, 7.6%, and final touches, 6.5%, with a sprinkle of mystery costs, 2.1%. Mix it all together, and you've got a housing cost that's absolutely impossible to digest for most Americans. The really mind-blowing part? Land costs have actually decreased as a percentage of total home price, from 17.8% in 2022 to 13.7% in 2024. But that's not because land is getting cheaper. It's because construction costs are rising so dramatically, they're making everything else look smaller in comparison. Remember that old starter home your parents bought in the 80s? The one with the basic finishes and modest size? That would be considered luxury construction by today's standards. Builders simply can't construct homes like that anymore and make the numbers work. Everything from code requirements to consumer expectations has changed. The regulatory costs alone will make your head spin. Permit fees average around $7,640 per home, and that's just one small piece of the regulatory puzzle. Impact fees, environmental reviews, inspection costs, they all pile up before construction even begins. In some markets, these fees can add tens of thousands to the cost of a home. Material prices have been on a roller coaster that only goes up since 2022. Global supply chain issues, manufacturing shutdowns, and broad inflation have all conspired to make basic building materials painfully expensive. Remember the great lumber price surge that had people joking about building houses out of gold instead? That wasn't actually that far from reality. And the labor situation is brutal. After the 2008 housing crash, hundreds of thousands of skilled construction workers left the industry, and many never came back. The ones who stayed can charge premium rates because there simply aren't enough skilled workers to go around. That's Economics 101. When demand exceeds supply, prices go up. The math here is brutal. If construction costs account for 64.4% of a home's price, and land takes another 13.7%, that leaves just 21.9% for everything else: financing, marketing, overhead, and yes, profit. Speaking of profit, builders are reporting average margins of about 11% in 2024, up slightly from 10.1% in 2022. Some people hear 11% profit and think builders are making out like bandits, but that's actually pretty slim considering the risks involved. Construction is incredibly capital-intensive with long timelines and massive upfront costs. One bad weather season, one supply chain hiccup, or one regulatory delay can wipe out that entire margin, and then some. So what's the solution? Some builders are exploring innovative construction methods like modular or factory-built housing. The idea is simple. If you can standardize the process and build components in a controlled factory setting, you might be able to reduce labor costs and waste while improving quality control. But even these approaches face challenges with regulatory approval and consumer acceptance. Others are looking at alternative materials that might cost less or last longer. But here's the catch. New materials often require special installation techniques, which means training workers and getting building code approvals. That takes time and money. 2. Some municipalities are trying to help by streamlining permitting processes or reducing impact fees for affordable housing projects. But these efforts, while welcome, are often just nibbling around the edges of the problem. The fundamental math remains challenging. How do you build a home that's both affordable for buyers and profitable for builders when the basic inputs cost so much? Here's an uncomfortable truth. Without subsidies or innovative financing, truly affordable new construction might be mathematically impossible in many markets. The gap between construction costs and what lower-income and even middle-income households can afford has grown too wide. That doesn't mean we should give up. It means we need to get creative about how we approach the problem. Maybe it's density bonuses that allow builders to construct more units on the same land. Maybe it's public-private partnerships where cities contribute land or financing to make projects work. Or maybe it's rethinking what a starter home looks like in 2024. What if we normalized smaller homes with more basic finishes? What if we built more attached housing where infrastructure costs can be shared? What if we re-examined building codes to focus on safety while eliminating requirements that add cost without clear benefits? And yes, what if we looked at subsidies not as handouts, but as investments in community stability and economic mobility? After all, we subsidize many things in our economy, from agriculture to energy to transportation. Housing is fundamental to human well-being and economic productivity. Maybe it deserves similar support. Interest rate reality, the hidden multiplier of housing costs. We're spending all this time talking about subsidies for housing construction, but let's be real. There's another massive factor that's crushing dreams of homeownership faster than you can say mortgage application denied. When interest rates shot up from those cozy pandemic-era 3% rates to today's painful 7%, it created an $852 monthly payment increase on a median-priced home. That's basically like someone forcing you to lease a BMW you never wanted and definitely can't afford. Interest rates are the ultimate multiplier effect in housing costs. Think about it. When you buy a house, you're paying that price stretched over 30 years with interest compounding the whole time. It's like housing costs on steroids, and right now those steroids are working overtime. Let me break this down with a simple example. Say you're looking at a perfectly average $400,000 home with a 20% down payment. At 3% interest, the 2021 rate, your monthly payment would be around $1,349. At today's 7% rate, that exact same house costs you $2,128 per month. A 58% increase without the house price changing at all. This means you now need about $40,000 more in household income just to qualify for the same property. No amount of cutting back on avocado toast or fancy coffee will bridge that gap. The painful truth is that the Federal Reserve's fight against inflation has absolutely demolished housing affordability. Sure, we needed to control inflation, but the collateral damage has been severe, freezing countless potential homebuyers out of the market entirely. These high rates have created what economists call the lock-in effect. Imagine this. You refinanced during those sweet pandemic days and locked in a 2.8% interest rate. Would you ever sell your house if it meant taking on a new mortgage at 7%? Of course not. So homeowners who might normally sell their starter homes to upgrade or downsize are staying put, making an already dire housing shortage even worse. Fewer people selling means even fewer homes on the market, pushing prices up even more in a vicious cycle. First-time buyers are getting hit hardest. When you already own a home, rising values build your equity even as affordability worsens. But trying to break into the market for the first time, you're facing high prices and high interest rates with no existing home equity to cushion the blow. The Housing Affordability Index for first-time buyers has cratered from 97.6 in 2021 to 65.8 today, well below the crisis territory mark of 100. To understand how bad it's gotten, look at the 1990s when mortgage rates were similarly around 7 to 8%. The crucial difference? Homes cost way less compared to incomes back then. Today, we have record-high home prices and high interest rates, the worst possible combination. Meanwhile, investors are thriving while regular homebuyers suffer. In early 2024, investors grabbed a record 14.8% of all homes sold nationwide, the highest percentage ever recorded. While regular families get priced out, investors with cash or special financing are swooping in. Will we ever see those 3% rates again? Probably not anytime soon. Those rates came from extraordinary circumstances, a global pandemic and massive government intervention. Most economists think we'll eventually settle around 5 to 6%, which would help but wouldn't completely solve the affordability crisis. Let me share what this means for real people. Take Jessica and Marcus, both 34 with good jobs who've been saving for a down payment for 5 years. In 2021, they could have afforded a $380,000 home in their target neighborhood, but decided to wait, hoping prices might cool. Today, that same house costs $425,000, and with doubled interest rates, their monthly payment would be about $1,200 higher. They'd need a 43% income increase just to afford what was within reach 3 years ago. This is why so many millennials feel like the goalposts keep moving. Their parents could buy a home on one income with interest rates that sometimes went into double digits, yet housing still took up a smaller percentage of their paycheck. Today's buyers need 2 professional incomes and rates half what their parents paid, yet still can't afford to buy. The math simply doesn't work anymore. The affordability crisis becomes even clearer when you consider that lenders typically want housing costs under 28% of gross income. At today's rates, a median-priced home requires a household income around $120,000, far above what most young families earn. This explains why homeownership rates for millennials lag so far behind previous generations at the same age. What's most heartbreaking about this interest rate situation isn't just the numbers, it's the dreams being permanently shelved. How many young families have given up on homeownership entirely? How many children won't grow up in the neighborhoods their parents had hoped for? And when exactly did the American dream become save frantically, affordability oases, where housing still works? That $120,000 income requirement is crushing dreams nationwide. But here's the twist. In some American cities, you can still buy a house on a teacher's salary, while your friends in coastal metros need 6-figure incomes just to afford a shoebox apartment. There are entire regions where the housing market hasn't completely lost its mind, and some cities are actually paying people to move there. Welcome to America's affordability oases, where the dream of homeownership is thriving. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, the average home costs $171,200, and the city will literally hand you $10,000 just to relocate there as a remote worker. Imagine waking up in your spacious Tulsa home with a yard big enough for barbecues, knowing your mortgage payment is less than what your coastal friends pay for parking. That's a reality for thousands of families finding refuge in these affordable markets. This stark contrast shows just how uneven our national housing emergency really is. While coastal cities dominate headlines with their eye-watering prices, many parts of the Midwest and South still offer genuine opportunities for middle-class families. The affordability index in the Midwest sits at a healthy 120.3, meaning the typical family has 20% more income than needed to qualify for a median-priced home. Compare that to the West's dismal 66.8, where families fall seriously short of what they need. These affordable areas are vibrant, growing cities that have simply made different policy choices than their expensive counterparts. Take Houston, for example. While similarly sized San Jose has crippling housing costs, Houston builds approximately 14 times more homes thanks to its minimal zoning approach. Without excessive restrictions, Houston developers can actually respond to market demand by building more housing. The result? Tree-lined neighborhoods where teachers, firefighters, and retail workers can afford charming homes with front porches where they actually know their neighbors. Or look at Minneapolis, which made headlines when it eliminated single-family zoning citywide. The results speak for themselves. Permits for 2 to 4 unit buildings jumped by 45% between 2020 and 2022. By allowing more housing types in more neighborhoods, Minneapolis created thousands of new homes that would have been literally illegal to build before. These success stories aren't flukes. They're evidence that smart policy choices can keep housing affordable even during nationwide price spikes. Montgomery, Alabama has significantly expanded its affordable housing through local initiatives and creative funding mechanisms. The city demonstrates that with the right approach, growth doesn't have to mean unaffordability. Remote work is reshaping these dynamics dramatically. Since 2020, we've seen a significant shift in migration patterns, with many professionals fleeing expensive coastal cities for more affordable regions. Places like Tulsa and Oklahoma City are actively courting remote workers with incentive programs designed to attract new residents. Remote work trends are influencing migration patterns, with many individuals moving to more affordable regions like Tulsa and Oklahoma City, where housing remains accessible despite rising costs in other areas. Notes one housing researcher I interviewed. This geographic arbitrage represents a potential win-win. Stressed-out coastal workers get affordable housing and more breathing room, while previously shrinking cities gain new residents, tax revenue, and economic activity. The average monthly rent nationwide has jumped over 30% since 2020, but many Midwestern and Southern cities have managed to keep housing costs under control through this period. The Biden administration has recognized this potential, launching programs to support local governments in removing barriers to affordable housing construction. These initiatives can help cities implement the kinds of policies that have proven successful in places like Houston and Minneapolis. What makes these affordability oases work? It's usually a combination of approaches. First, they have land use policies that actually allow housing to be built. Whether it's Houston's minimal zoning or Minneapolis's duplex/triplex legalization, these cities don't artificially restrict housing supply. Second, they have available land and room to grow. Unlike coastal cities constrained by geography, many affordable cities can expand outward as well as upward, relieving pressure on existing neighborhoods. Third, many have streamlined permitting processes that reduce the time and cost of building new homes. When developers spend less time fighting bureaucracy, they can build more housing at lower costs. Fourth, these cities often maintain a pro-development attitude. Rather than viewing new housing as a threat to neighborhood character, they see it as essential infrastructure for growing communities. The differences in what your money can buy across regions are startling. The same $250,000 that barely gets you a studio apartment in San Francisco could buy you a 4-bedroom house with a yard in Toledo, Ohio, or Montgomery, Alabama. A household earning $80,000 might be stuck perpetually renting in Boston, while that same family could easily afford a comfortable home in Indianapolis. Of course, affordable housing isn't the only factor in deciding where to live. Jobs, family connections, and quality of life all play major roles. But the remote work revolution has removed one of the biggest barriers, the need to live near your employer. As more companies embrace fully remote or hybrid arrangements, the freedom to choose a location based on affordability becomes much more realistic. Could this trend actually help rebalance America's housing market? It's certainly possible. As people vote with their feet and their down payments, expensive cities may face pressure to reform their housing policies or risk losing their tax base. Meanwhile, affordable cities gaining new residents can invest in making themselves even more attractive destinations. The lesson is clear. Not all housing markets are created equal, and policy choices matter enormously. Places like Tulsa, Oklahoma City, and Montgomery prove that the American dream of homeownership isn't dead. It's just unevenly distributed. With the right approach, cities can keep housing affordable even in today's challenging environment. Solutions that actually work, policy paths forward. Policy choices matter enormously, but which ones actually deliver results? Turns out, when California passed a law letting homeowners convert single-family homes into duplexes, tens of thousands of new homes appeared like magic. While politicians argue about band-aid solutions, some states have quietly discovered fixes that actually work, and the numbers are kind of mind-blowing. These success stories aren't happy accidents. They're blueprints we can actually copy. The housing crisis isn't some unsolvable mystery. It's a policy problem with proven solutions. Let's look at what's actually working across the country. California's Senate Bill 9 has been a game changer for housing production. Facing severe housing shortages in their cities, California needed to make better use of existing land. This law cuts through the red tape for homeowners who want to convert their single-family homes into duplexes or add accessory dwelling units. The result? Tens of thousands of new ADUs popping up in neighborhoods that desperately needed more housing options. This wasn't some massive government program, just a simple rule change that unlocked existing land for more homes. New York faced similar challenges, but with extensive transit infrastructure already in place. They implemented policies that override local zoning restrictions near transit stations. Instead of letting each small-town block apartment buildings next to train stations, which makes zero sense, the state stepped in to say, actually, we need housing where transportation already exists. This kind of transit-oriented development creates affordable housing where people actually want to live, near jobs and services. In Montgomery County, Maryland, skyrocketing prices were pushing out essential workers. Their solution? The Housing Production Fund. Think of it as the county becoming its own housing investor, but with a conscience. They offer lower interest rates to developers who set aside units for low-income families. This lets the county compete directly with private investors who would otherwise build only luxury units. It's basically saying, we'll help fund your project if you help house our essential workers. Rural areas face completely different challenges with fewer developers interested in building there. Maine's Rural Affordable Housing Rental Program addresses this by using forgivable loans to incentivize affordable housing in areas where developers typically wouldn't build. They target projects providing homes for families earning 80% or less of the local median income. This is exactly the kind of focused program that helps the people most squeezed by the housing crisis. Corporate investors buying up entire neighborhoods created another housing pressure point. Senator Merkley's proposed End Hedge Fund Control of American Homes Act could provide a solution by limiting large investors to owning no more than 50 single-family homes, forcing them to divest from properties exceeding that cap, with penalties for companies that don't comply. While it hasn't passed yet, it represents the kind of targeted approach that addresses one specific driver of the crisis without disrupting the entire market. One of the most exciting trends solves multiple problems simultaneously. Those depressing, half-empty strip malls you drive past? They could be your next neighborhood. Research shows that converting just the top 10% of potential strip mall candidates nationwide could create over 700,000 new homes. That's not just good for housing. It breathes new life into dead commercial zones and creates more walkable communities. Cities like Albuquerque have embraced these kinds of practical reforms. They've made it easier to build ADUs and convert non-residential buildings into multifamily housing. These aren't radical changes, just common-sense updates to outdated rules that were blocking new homes from being built. Within months of changing their rules, permit applications jumped 300%. Even the federal government is getting involved. The Biden administration's Housing Supply Action Plan includes $85 million in grants for localities that remove barriers to housing construction. This creates a powerful incentive for cities to reform their zoning codes and permitting processes. Now, let's get real about what doesn't work. Rent control might sound great. Who doesn't want stable rent? But research consistently shows it reduces housing supply over time as developers build elsewhere. First-time homebuyer tax credits can help individuals, but actually drive up prices in supply-constrained markets, making the overall affordability problem worse. And those affordable housing mandates, without density bonuses, they often lead to fewer housing units overall. What makes the effective policies different is that they address the root cause. We need more homes where people want to live. When you make it legal to build more housing and make that process faster and cheaper, the market responds with more supply. Let's see how these solutions could help our families. For Zoe and Tyler, zoning reforms like those in California would increase housing supply in their neighborhood, potentially cooling the bidding wars that have kept them from buying a home. For the Martinez family, Montgomery County's approach could create mixed-income apartment buildings with units they could actually afford on their budget. And for the Johnsons, ADU reforms would let them build a small unit on their property where they could live, while renting out their main house for income, solving their downsizing dilemma. Consider what happened when Minneapolis eliminated single-family zoning. Home builders responded with exactly the kind of missing middle, housing that's naturally more affordable, housing twice as many families in the same space. The beauty of many of these solutions is their simplicity. We don't need to reinvent our entire economic system or spend trillions of dollars. Often, we just need to get out of the way and let housing be built. In places that have embraced these reforms, the housing crisis isn't solved overnight, but the trajectory changes dramatically for the better. Your housing playbook, practical steps based on your situation. While policy reforms can reshape our housing landscape over time, you're probably wondering, what about right now? What can you actually do today if you're caught in this mess? Emily Craig was flat broke with terrible credit when she stumbled upon a little-known government program that helped her buy a historic house without a penny down. Her secret weapon? A USDA rural housing loan that 97% of Americans don't even know exists. The housing playbook isn't one size fits all. Your best move depends entirely on whether you're renting, buying, or somewhere awkwardly in between. Let's break down some practical strategies based on your specific situation. If you're currently renting, know your rights. My landlord tried raising my rent 20% until I showed him the rent stabilization laws, says Tanya from Oakland. Tenant protections vary dramatically by location, with many states implementing measures that limit how much your rent can increase each year. Negotiate longer leases. Many property owners will trade a small discount for guaranteed occupancy. Consider approaching your landlord about a 2-year lease in exchange for a more modest rent increase. Explore co-living arrangements. Sharing a house cut my housing costs in half while giving me built-in friends, reports Miguel from Austin. Many young professionals are opting for shared living spaces with private bedrooms, building community while slashing housing expenses. Reimagine roommate situations. Creative shared housing isn't just for college students. Professionals at all stages are finding financial relief through thoughtful cohabitation. For future homebuyers, USDA rural loans. I bought my first home with zero down in a small town 30 minutes from the city, shares Emily. These loans aren't just for farmers. They're designed for moderate-income households in designated areas and offer that magical zero down payment that makes homeownership possible. FHA loans. These allow down payments as low as 3.5% and accept lower credit scores than conventional mortgages. Perfect for those with less than perfect credit histories. VA loans. If you've served in the military, VA loans offer perhaps the best deal in housing with no down payment required and no private mortgage insurance. Down payment assistance. The $8,000 grant I received made all the difference between renting forever and owning my condo, explains Jordan from Minnesota. These programs exist in nearly every state, but fly under the radar, often providing grants or low-interest loans to help first-time buyers cover upfront costs. Focus on 2 parallel tracks. While exploring these alternative pathways to homeownership, continue building your financial foundation. Conventional 20% down mortgages aren't the only path. In fact, they're increasingly the exception rather than the rule. Community land trusts. These innovative arrangements separate land ownership from the home itself, allowing people to purchase homes at below-market prices while the land remains in a trust, keeping housing permanently affordable. For current homeowners, house hacking strategies. Renting our spare bedroom covers 40% of our mortgage, says Layla from Denver. Many homeowners discover they can cover 50% or more of their mortgage by renting just a portion of their home. Accessory dwelling units, ADUs. Converting garages, basements, or building small backyard cottages creates rental income while adding property value. Multi-generational housing. Families combining resources can afford better housing in better neighborhoods than they could separately, with shared childcare, utilities, and daily expenses creating significant savings for everyone involved. Turn housing challenges into income opportunities. Beyond traditional refinancing, consider how your property might generate revenue to offset housing costs while providing affordable options for others. Real success stories. Zoe and Tyler pivoted their home buying strategy completely after 7 failed offers. They discovered an FHA loan program that allowed them to purchase a duplex with just 3.5% down. By living in one unit and renting the other, they've managed to significantly offset their mortgage payment. While it wasn't their original dream of a single-family home, they've found unexpected satisfaction in building equity while also helping provide affordable housing to another family. The Martinez family, facing another substantial rent increase, connected with a local housing advocacy group that helped them negotiate with their landlord. They also restructured their budget using the hierarchy of housing needs approach, prioritizing location over space, and found a smaller apartment in the same school district that saved them $400 monthly. Those savings are now going directly into an account earmarked for a future down payment. Barbara and William Johnson found their solution through a creative house hacking approach. They converted their basement into a legal accessory dwelling unit with the help of a local aging-in-place program that provided low-interest financing. The rental income now covers a significant portion of their property taxes and provides extra security as they age. Finding support. Advocacy groups like the National Low Income Housing Coalition provide crucial support and resources for navigating housing challenges. They offer educational materials that can help you understand complex housing programs and connect with local assistance. Sometimes the best strategy is simply knowing where to turn for expert help. The hard truth is that navigating today's housing landscape requires more creativity, flexibility, and resourcefulness than previous generations needed. But that doesn't mean the dream is dead. It just looks different. For some, success means embracing a duplex instead of a single-family home. For others, it means building community through co-living or multi-generational arrangements rather than going it alone. So, is the American dream of homeownership dead? Let's be real. It's not dead, but it's definitely on life support. The data speaks for itself. Nearly 70% of Americans are deeply concerned about housing costs. That's millions of people losing sleep over whether they'll ever have a place to call their own. The silver lining? Americans recognize the problem. Over 75% agree we face a housing shortage, and 80% support policies to build 3 million homes. The government has taken initial steps with $100 million toward breaking barriers, but that's just the beginning. Solutions exist beyond political promises, from converting abandoned buildings to supporting mixed-income developments. Your voice matters in this conversation. Talk to local officials, join advocacy groups, and vote for housing-focused candidates. The American dream isn't dead, it's evolving, and we all